Good afternoon, I'm Mark Watts. I'm the Chief Executive of UK Transport in Europe, and welcome to this EU-UK Forum event, Moving Forward Together, Opportunities for UK-EU Transport After Brexit. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks very much indeed to the EU-UK Forum for hosting this event. As you probably know, the Forum aims to facilitate and nurture a constructive, informed dialogue between the UK and its European neighbours now that the post-Brexit agreement has been reached. The forum is non-partisan and designed for a platform for discussion, debate and information exchange. With that in mind, I know the forum very much welcomes your insights, expertise and ideas. And I think from my point of view, as an organisation representing the UK transport sector, we really welcome this initiative. It's absolutely essential that we draw a line under some of the political debate that's been going on over the last 4 years and move forward. And platforms like this, forums like this, are a great opportunity to start thinking about how we can build stronger links with our European partners and how, as we put it, we can move forward together. So congratulations to the EU-UK Forum on this initiative, and in particular, of course, welcoming us to this particular event today. It's also a great pleasure to welcome one of my two guests. Firstly, Simon Argyle, who is from the UK mission to the EU. Simon is the Deputy Director there and the Councillor for Competitiveness, Connectivity and Innovation. Welcome to you, Simon.
Mark, thank you, and welcome to you as well. Look, firstly, I'd just like to thank the EU-UK Forum for hosting this event. I'm sure it will be a very rich discussion that we can have this afternoon. So look, I'm going to talk about a few things starting off now. I think, firstly, I'm going to touch a little bit on the TCA, where we arrived, and then talk a little bit around actually opportunities, which is the kind of the purpose of this event, and then I will talk a little bit about what we're doing in the UK mission and how we've actually moved from being a representation as a member state to a mission as a third country. So look, I think if we just pull our minds back to what's happened over the last year, the UK has been in a transition period, so where we've effectively been operating to the EU acquis, but very much out of the EU in kind of name in a political sense. So since the 1st of January, we've been outside the customs union single market, and we've been operating on the TCA under the terms of the TCA that were agreed on Christmas Eve, as we can all recall. And that's obviously been a completely different environment politically for us. It's been a completely different environment for businesses that are now having to kind of trade with the EU on completely different terms to what came before. So we know there's a period now that we're going through where businesses are adjusting to those new measures. Hopefully the TCA provides zero tariff, zero quotas that we agreed, unprecedented. That's very much a positive in terms of what the government agreed with the EU. But that does come with some aspects that are attached to it as well. And I know you will all be, if I speak rules of origin, that won't be a surprise to any of you to see that actually, well, hang on a minute, is it zero tariff, zero quota where you've got rules of origin coming into the frame as well? So one of the things that we didn't do under the TCA was manage to get diagonal accumulation, which would have brought other trading arrangements in and made rules of origin a lot easier. That was something that the EU were not prepared to give us. Having said that, there are ways and means, and I certainly know businesses at the current time are working with government to look at how to maximise the provisions under the trade and cooperation agreement that we've now agreed. So we will continue to do that. We're not saying that this is easy, it's definitely not, but hopefully as time goes on and we start to get used to the new measures, we can really see where those interests and issues are in terms of what are teething issues, what are a little bit more substantive, and actually what are some of the bigger issues that perhaps need to be dealt with a little bit further down the line, more politically. Just as a point of reference, I think most of you will have seen that the EU had asked for an extension for ratification of the TCA to 30th of April 2021 this year. We've actually, the UK has agreed to that, so that ratification period has been extended, and we will hopefully move to full ratification at the 1st of May onwards timeline. That will have a bit of an impact in terms of when the Partnership Council and the formal committees stand up and take place formally. But there's discussions going on at the minute informally, as you would expect, across a range of areas. And let's not just forget that we're already operating under the withdrawal agreement and the various the Northern Ireland Protocol. So there are conversations going ahead, and you've seen the kind of the more formal meetings between the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster and the Commissioner on these areas. In terms of transport, what I want to do is just talk about some of the aspects that we managed to agree in the TCA. So on aviation, we have managed to agree an air services agreement. This is based on point-to-point, effectively, so third and fourth freedoms to those that know aviation, freedoms of the sky a little bit better. We also agreed close collaboration on aviation security and air traffic management as well. So that was a good win. I think, but what we did do is ensure that UK carriers do have the freedom within that, and establish the CAA as a UK regulator that is independent, both of the EU but also of UK government too. So that was quite significant changes in terms of aviation. There is scope within the Air Services Agreement to negotiate bilaterally with member states higher freedoms, particularly cargo fifths, which I know is certainly of an interest to certain EU member states. And we're in the process of going through that now. But again, this point of ratification, I think, is just important in all of that. In terms of road transport, again, very positive outcome. UK hauliers can continue to operate through and within the EU. This is important to allow the flow of goods, food and medicine, and also to ensure that we can export our goods. And I think when I say, it's good for both sides. I think 85% of the cross-channel traffic actually is skewed towards the EU haulage market. But of course, that is of economic benefit to the UK. So it's really, really important that this keeps flowing, that it makes sense and is with minimal impact. The kind of the issue that we had, and some of this now, I will touch on this one, particularly when I talk a little bit about musicians, because I know that's very topical. We did agree to some cabotage and cross-trade within that. But I would say that the backdrop against this is the EU within the internal market tightening the rules, as we've seen through the mobility package as well. So there's quite a bit of framing around the whole kind of European haulage debate that's going on at the moment in Brussels too. Just in terms of moving on to buses and coaches, again, we secured the continued rights for them to operate to and from the EU, particularly with the picking up and dropping off of passengers, which was actually is more acute on the island of Ireland, and that's really the issue where we wanted to try and address that as well. So I think just in terms of transport, it was a fairly good outcome from where we were previously in the single market, and to agree these under a trade and cooperation agreement. There's obviously other angles within this. A lot of areas get discussed at a global level through other conventions. So again, bringing the understanding of where those have impact into the whole relationship is important as well. Just your kind of goods as well. I did touch on this at the start. I would say, obviously, a zero quota, zero trade outcome is very good, notwithstanding the real issues that are in there. Things are happening now. Obviously, we're seeing bureaucracy around customs there, customs paperwork. We know that there's different processes in place depending which member state we arrive at. I think part of our desire at the minute is to try and get the EU to streamline these processes as much as possible. So we know that when hauliers, wherever they're moving or businesses are moving goods from one market to another, there's a standard process there. That will take a little bit of time, and I think we understand that, but we're acutely aware of the issues that businesses are having, and are working hand in glove with London departments to try and deal with these as we go through these months. Obviously, made all the more difficult by the current COVID pandemic, which is underway at the moment as well. So look, I kind of given a flavour of the TCA. I've spoken about some of the issues. I think just coming back to touring musicians, I know that's a very live issue. Visas, again, not my specific area in UPMIS, but 90 days and 180 days in a certain categories in there This, at the end of the day, was all about ending free movement of people from the UK. So it does have an impact, and it will have an impact. In terms of musicians as well, as I just alluded to in the cabotage rules, we could only go so far, and we get to a point where the rules are kind of quite liberal for UK-EU trade. The EU are tightening up and in their own internal market, so these are going to be ever more difficult, certainly through enforcement within the EU. And I think these are points that often get overlooked, and we all almost focus through the lens of what's going on between the UK and the EU on these regards. So I would just caution, do look a little bit broader into what's going on in terms of the Commission agenda and the internal politics between member states on some of these areas. Erasmus, I think, is worth just touching on very, very quickly, because I know there's a debate around this as well. In the final analysis, the EU made an offer. It didn't offer value, and I say value in the round because a lot of people say, "Oh, it's a value for money thing." Yes, it was, but there are other aspects in that as well, which you know, for us, just did not make this a compelling package to continue. So we really did want to do that, but at the end of the day, you know, it just wasn't there. So again, we kind of agreed with the EU that we would go our kind of separate ways. But there are already mechanisms within the kind of existing Erasmus arrangements with other member states. Obviously, Ireland have said that they are going to take some of the cover for Northern Ireland. So I think, again, it's one of those areas where we just need to look at what already exists and how we really maximising the provisions within the existing arrangements. That said, now I just really want to come on to some of the opportunities and really strike at what this session really is about. And there's two in particular I'd really just want to talk about. And I think firstly is research. Now, one of the key things that we managed to get from this agreement is that the UK would fully associated with Horizon Europe. We agreed the terms, and that's all in the accompanying TCA. So what we need to do now is kind of wait for the EU to put the regulations in place, and then everything can be signed off. Obviously, Horizon is one of the major funders of transport R&D in particular, with around €2 billion per annum just been spent in this area alone. So it's nothing, you know, quite substantial. And again, one that we really should try and leverage. And these areas that are covered range from clean, safe and accessible transport to smart mobility and new energy solutions. And all forms of transport are covered here, including, you know, things that might arise during the duration of the programme. So we need to kind of bear, you know, the opportunities here in mind. In particular, there are 3 multi-billion-pound public-private partnerships being funded under Horizon. The first one, Clean Aviation, that funds disruptive innovation with a view of reducing emissions by 55% as we move towards 2030. So very interesting initiative there. The second one is European Rail, which is looking at what is needed to move 75% of all freight travelled onto the rail network. We know that's been a massive challenge in the past. Can we use innovation to leverage new opportunities there? And the final one is Single European Sky and air traffic management. So how can we improve connectivity and air traffic management in these areas? And I think if you just look at some of the underlying regulations that we've been involved in when we're member states, as our says plus, you know, all about actually, can we make more efficient use of airspace? Can we get planes travelling more directly and rather than having to weave around protected areas of airspace? So really, really good initiatives. And I think on Horizon, we really do need to see this as a continuation in a lot of ways of Horizon 2020, and really encouraging entities, UK entities in particular, to participate and to really think about what we can achieve together in this important programme. They are eligible. There's a lot of scope in there, and I think you know, to think of these as being any different from the previous you know, Horizon programme is probably not a place to be. Let's just treat this as it's a similar continuation programme. The second one, and I'm not going to surprise anyone here, is Decarbonisation Agenda, particularly with the UK being COP president this year. Obviously, a big part of the work that we're working on as a mission. This is a priority for the UK and the EU, and you would have seen that the Prime Minister of the UK's 10-point plan for a green industrial revolution that came out in November. One to watch, the Department of Transport obviously bringing out its forward transport decarbonisation plan this spring. So that will be one that's on the agenda. The focus in Brussels really at the minute on the European Green Deal, reducing emissions by at least 55% by 2030. The DG Move's sustainable and smart mobility package, obviously central tenant of that. We're having discussions. We want to have more discussions, particularly with DG Move, but with other areas, to see how the UK can help the EU to reach these really, really important targets that we've all set ourselves. Well, obviously, one of the COP26 campaign focuses is going to be around zero emission mobility, with the aim of securing commitments from the major auto markets, including the EU, to end sales of diesel and petrol internal combustion engine vehicles. We've already set the tempo, we feel, on that by bringing that forward to 2030. And we're obviously trying to ensure that the EU has ambition in a similar area. And this is a good, if you can ever point to something that really demonstrates, where the dialogue was a little bit skewed last year as we agreed, the TCA. We're not lowering standards. We're going to be really ambitious in these areas. And I think through the green challenges that we're demonstrating that in spades. We've had conversations, including at political level, with Commissioner Vălean. We're hoping that's going to continue and really try to make the COP a success. But ZEVs is just one example of a range of areas where we're looking at how we can actually shape, the EU agenda in many ways, but also the global agenda and what we can do collectively. There's a lot of areas where actually, if you look at things, that we're all very much on the same page as we go together in this new partnership, which then kind of brings me on to a point where I'll kind of draw to a conclusion in terms of my pitch. Which is, how the UK representation to the EU as a member state has now morphed into the UK mission to the EU as a third country. And look, our role invariably has changed. We're no longer servicing working groups of the council, which was kind of a 90% tasking of our staff in the past. What we are doing is twofold, really. We're working with London departments and obviously number 10, the Cabinet Office, to implement and really shape the TCA, maximise the TCA by both parties, by bringing that EU insight and acting as a link with the institutions out here in Brussels. But secondly, as well, is, the EU have got a very ambitious and wide-ranging forward agenda. And, we've got views on that. We've got, opinions. We want to engage in the debate and engage with the Brussels bubble, as we term it, to really get to, where are we coming from? Where's industry coming from? To try and just, enrich and further that debate and perhaps look at things from a different angle. Again, I find, just during my tenures in OCREP, and this is my second time being here, often the end goals are the same. Method to getting there might be different, and it's about exploring that and seeing how we can actually leverage the benefits between us. So look, I think I'll pause there and hand back to you, Mike. But I hope that was helpful for the audience.
Well, thank you so much, Simon. And indeed, I do want to invite the audience to submit any questions or comments they have to you as our first guest on the programme this afternoon. Forum, any questions you may have to Simon, but also to say to you, Simon, thank you very much for that very, very comprehensive analysis of the state of play of our new relationship with the EU. As you say, there's understandable focus by the media on some aspects of it, but the scale and the breadth and the ambition of transport partnership is absolutely huge. And I think you've just highlighted some of the very positive aspects of it that perhaps don't get a lot of attention, including, of course, Horizon Europe, which is a huge programme of over 100 billion euros, of which the UK remains a leading partner. And of course, COP26, where we'll be working very closely with Italy, who's, I think, one of the co-hosts, but also obviously a lot of interest across the EU, including the EU itself. So it's that we particularly want to focus on, if we made those positive aspects of how we can make a success of the new relationship. It's in no one's interests to make this agreement fail. We want it to work. It has to work. If things don't move, goods or people, our economies don't work effectively. So perhaps if I can turn to you, someone ask you about what can businesses and industry do to help the UK government deliver that ambitious agenda in the field of transport? What should they be doing? What sort of examples could you give of how they could try and make this new agreement, this new relationship, a success?
So first thing, Mark, I would say is understand the provisions in the trade and cooperation agreement. This has been negotiated over, yes, quite quickly, but I think just understanding, what does this mean, in terms of connectivity, and in terms of, the movement of goods across borders from the UK to the EU. I think where businesses are facing difficulties, we're not saying there wasn't the period to try and move to the new rules, and we as the UK have introduced easements that saw more of a staging approach for certainly for movement of goods and people coming to the UK. But where industry are finding that the problems is that cannot necessarily be solved quickly, is raising them with UK departments and us, at the other end, and seeing, well, what are these issues? Can we bring, case studies to light and say, well, are there ways which we can, is it being used in the right way? Are there ways we can ease these processes? Are there things that we need to do as government to try and help ease these from form filling and other areas? And I thought, some of this will require potentially, looking at business models again, differently. It was very, very different when we're in the single market and customs union. You didn't really have to think about any of these things. You could set your supply chains up and do things that made use of that broader ecosystem. We're outside that now, so we do have to think a little bit differently on how these mechanisms can work. And one thing I've found, and particularly I worked for a time in the private sector as well, is that often it's not until these things kind of become a little bit stark that you start looking at supply chains, and actually they're quite complex. But there's always, I've been amazed in the past at actually the kind of the breadth of supply chains, and actually when you get to top management, don't necessarily understand what the supply chains look like. So that then instigates broader considerations of what's our business model, what do these supply chains, is there any benefits we can actually achieve from the new from these new arrangements. So I'll just ask everyone really just to look at that, and if it's not available or you find a difficulty in understanding the rules, come and talk to us, I think is the main thing.
Thank you for that, Simon. It's very clear guidance for the audience there, particularly business audience, people listening in, that they should raise projects or problems with you, particularly if they have case studies, and you will work with them to try and tackle them. And that's really one of your new roles in Brussels as a third country mission now, to try and work with business to make a success of this agreement. We've got a question from one member of the audience, if I can just refer to that, regarding decarbonisation of the transport sector. Could you give perhaps a little bit more detail on what the UK's plans are in terms of the transport decarbonisation plan, and how that may feed in to the June summit as it prepares the EU for COP26?
Yeah, so we're kind of quite active in this area, and me myself in UCMIS, I'm leading on the kind of zero emission vehicles campaign that we're trying to run in. So our objective in all of this is to make sure that the EU can match UK ambition, and UK ambition in this has been to set the phase out of the internal combustion engine at 2030. Now, we're not sure if that is going to be achievable within the EU, but ultimately we're talking here about reducing global CO2 and actually improving local air quality as well. So one of the things that I'm speaking to my team about, and in turn speaking to London departments about, is how can we actually just weave a number of these different cross-cutting themes into this campaign and really speak to the EU and other interlocutors in Brussels to try and figure out what are we trying to achieve in the round here, and actually back to the method, how do we get there? Because there's a number of different ways of doing this. And I think what we don't want to do is just kind of try to just throw our eggs in one basket to look at one particular target and maybe miss other things that are going around here. And there's other aspects as well, in terms of aviation, where we need to look at how we can decarbonise the aviation sector, have a discussions around these, what's possible, is the new technologies coming on stream, how can we maximise these things. The role, as we just said, of Horizon and those other things in bringing forward new technologies and not picking winners. There's a whole series of solutions out there. And we need just to be aware of what actually at this time might seem a little bit far off in the future, but with the right money, development, attention, could really be a bit of a game changer. So I think one of the things we're doing at the minute is we want to scope this out a little bit broader and then hopefully start taking the debate around Brussels and engaging with people who are equally keen to look at this from a different perspective and have a bit of ambition.
Well, indeed. Thank you so much, Simon. In fact, that question came from the very people we will be engaging with. Indeed, you already are. That was from Noura Roussi, who's the first Secretary, Transport and Fisheries in the EU delegation to the UK. So welcome, Noura, to this programme this afternoon and for your question. Also, Noura makes the point, will the UK's plan cover all modes of transport? I think you've already addressed that, but maybe just to make it absolutely clear, Simon, the UK's ambition is, I believe, to decarbonise, and this will be covered in the plan, every single sector of the transport industry.
Yeah, so look, I think DfT is still working up their plan. As I said, we're expecting that in the spring. But of course, at this point in time, civil servants, my colleagues in government as well as ministers, are looking at all different types of transport and what the art of the possible is. Obviously, a big focus on road transport. That is obviously one of the major sources of CO2 and local air quality issues. But again, rail and aviation, I'd be surprised if they weren't being considered. And as you know, within the UK, there's been quite a push for a while now on actually walking and cycling and trying to maximise the opportunities there too.
Okay, thanks, Simon. Our next question that's coming from E. Stanley, who says that business may be a bit challenged by your offer of come and talk to us. Maybe they're not so used to that, Simon, that new positive, refreshing approach that you are adopting at the UK mission to the EU. Is there a point of contact? East Stanley is asking, is there some email or a website or a go-to point that people can go to actually, in practical terms, take up your kind offer?
Yeah, so look, we as a mission, we have our own website, which people there's a kind of a generic email address there that people can use to do that. However, what I'd like to do is try and give you a little bit more of a direct line in. So look, let me take that away, and I'll just ask if I can work with Mark and Paul to try and just see if we can get something out there that gives a bit more information on the best methods of contacting us. But one of the, I think the ways that I would really just suggest that we do have regular monthly meetings with the B5 in the UK, so CBI, Make UK. Use them as well to kind of convene questions and bring these things to us. But let me take some of that away, and I'll see if I can get some details around on how we can be a little bit more approachable, I would suggest.
Well, thank you, Simon. Appreciate that offer, and obviously there is a lot of interest out there in what you're saying, and a desire to have a positive dialogue with you. And indeed, as we do at UKT, UK Transport in Europe, we are regularly, of course, talking to the UK mission to promote our common agenda of making transport between the UK and the EU a success. And very grateful to your approach and that of your colleagues over recent weeks since that agreement was struck, and obviously also with our EU counterparts too. And I know we're doing more events like this with EU partners in the coming weeks and months as well. We have another question in, if I may, Simon, and that really is about the Horizon Europe programme. Again, it's a vast programme. It's a continuation of Horizon 2020. But for the transport sector, it's probably never been as big. And as you say, it's focused not just on some of the traditional sectors, but there's a big partnership program now for rail and for aviation and for alternative fuels. Again, I think UK businesses in the past have found it quite difficult sometimes to navigate all these things. Again, if you can't name contact points now, perhaps we could follow that up. But is there a go-to point in the UK or indeed in Brussels where UK stakeholders that want to make a contribution or secure funding from Horizon, where they should go?
Yeah, so look, it's an interesting question, isn't it? I think we try and say we encourage industry, others to UK entities to bid for these, and the quick question comes back is how do we get involved? If I may, and there might be a separate session that we could think about on this and I could draw my team in, particularly Frank Moschler on the Horizon side, but also Eve Elwell on the transport side. Because I think when we talk about Horizon, it's very broad terms, it's very broad brush, and actually zeroing in a little bit on the transport side and actually the opportunities that we could look at there. And Frank, for example, is an expert and will be able to answer every question imaginable on how to get interest, get involved in the programme, bid for some of these programs. So we might just want to consider whether we can perhaps look at that separately to this audience that are interested in particular in Horizon, and give a bit more of a kind of a flavour of how to get involved and really maximise the benefits of Horizon. And I would just say on my previous question as well, I did name check CBI, Make UK, FSB and others. I should also have name checked UK Transport in Europe, because from a connectivity and industry perspective, obviously you've got the connections here, including with UTMOS as well. So please, colleagues, do use Mark and his team in this area as well.
Well, thank you, Simon. Praise from our guests is always welcome. So thank you for that little tribute to us. But yeah, I have to say, this is all about working together, be it UK interests, EU interests, or everyone working together to try and make this this new relationship a success. In fact, on this very point, I'm delighted to welcome in our next guest. Don't go anywhere, Simon, because we want you to come in certainly during our next guest contribution, but also at the end to make a few concluding remarks. It's with great delight I'm able to welcome Kate Jennings. Kate is from the Railway Industry Association in the UK. She's their policy director. Welcome, Kate. And maybe just to be clear, although you might want to clarify, the railway supply industry is represented by 300 members of RIA, but I think we're talking about exports to the volume of £800 million every year going from the UK to the EU. And of course, there's a lot of trade going from the EU to the UK as well. So it's a huge industry. And I know you're very pleased that the TCA was agreed with zero tariffs and zero quotas, which is a great boost to your sector. But I also know, Kate, you're very ambitious about the future relationship. So great to welcome you, Kate. I don't know whether you want to say a few words about RIA's view on the new relationship, and in particular some of your priorities in the year ahead. And you're on mute.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. It's really great to be here. I've got a couple of slides, but first, just to sort of build on what you said about RIA there. So we represent over 300 companies in the rail sector. They range from the larger tier 1 companies, and then we've got about 60% SMEs based all over the UK. But a lot of our member companies are actually global companies, and quite a lot of them are global European companies. So I just wanted to sort of set the context really for my slides, as what the most important thing for me really is that we keep collaborating, and the relationships are really important, just as important as they were before we left Europe. In fact, probably even more important, and that's why I think it's important that we do things like have these sort of conversations today. I'm not sure whether I'm sharing the slides or whether one of our colleagues. Okay, thank you. So just my first slide really is slightly sort of motherhood and apple pie, if you want to sort of bring that up. It's like a lot of the things we've been asking for, that RIA, before the EU TCA was agreed, were pretty much the things we always ask for. Recognise rail and the value of the sector. We want access to skilled workers. We want consistent standards that make trade successful and easy and reduce cost. We want borders that work. In rail, a lot of the procurement is public procurement, and I think that means there is a real role for government there. It's important that the procurement aspects of trade agreements are right, whether it's the EU trade agreement or whether it's some of the global agreements that both Europe and the UK are now looking at. And then I think we just touched on Horizon Europe. We really value the opportunities for collaboration on research and development. And as you say, Mark, we were really pleased that an agreement was reached, and it was an opportunity to have like zero tariffs, zero quotas, and that there was a continuing commitment by the UK government on things like Horizon Futures. Things are not perfect. I mean, I think there are areas where there are quotas and tariffs. Steel is one, and we've got British Steel in membership, and I know that they would much prefer that we have zero tariffs, zero quotas for steel as an example. But there's lots of positivity that we can build on. So what we've been doing as RIA then has been thinking about, well, okay, what are our priorities for 2021? Where do we go from here? We've got the agreement, sort of what next? And my final slide really is our initial thinking on what those priorities are. And again, you could say there are no surprises here, and I'm quite open to challenge on whether these are the right priorities, because I think for all of us, it's still the first weeks after the deal has been agreed. But for me, the predominant priority is maintaining those effective relationships with European colleagues and partners. And as part of that, making sure that there is a really positive interpretation of the TTA, because if we get this wrong at this moment, we could feel the damage of that for quite a long time, and it might be that that damage wasn't necessary because it wasn't what was intended and it wasn't what the deal actually said. And I'll give you a practical example of that. So lots of our members trade in services, in rail services. And a couple of weeks after the deal was signed, in the early weeks of January, we were hearing from the UK government side that no, it was fine. You didn't have to be established in Europe to trade in services. You could continue to trade in services. And yet the European Parliament website seemed to be saying that you had to establish in Europe. My understanding is that is not right, but it's a really good example of let's just make sure we all understand what we can do, and let's be optimistic and positive about what we can do, because just like some of my member companies where they're European companies with a UK subsidiary, we can be better together, we can do more together, and we want that positive relationship and positive interpretation. And then my next two priorities are really, about fixing things. Where we can fix things that could be even better, let's just get on and do that. So, the secret here is in the name, isn't it? It's a trade and collaboration agreement. And I understand that there are areas where, once the institutional arrangements are all finalised and we're ready to do the next steps, I think there are examples where Europe and the UK have agreed to continue collaboration and to fix things. And I think, there are opportunities maybe around notified bodies for our members, and opportunities potentially around professional qualifications that might support trade-in services. So I'm, looking to Simon, when we get to that point, to be coming to me with ideas of, where he would be expecting to be continuing the negotiation and fixing things. But then I recognise that there will be areas where the deal is the ink's not dry, the negotiations were tough, and that people don't want to reopen that, and we just need to accept the fact that we've got what we've got and make it work. But together with you, Mark, in UCTI, with our colleagues in UCMIS, with our European partners, we'd like to have some sort of ambitious medium-term goals. So it might be that on areas like, visa simplification or rules of origin, we're not going to change what the deal says in the next few weeks, but that doesn't mean to say that we shouldn't have the ambition to continue to make things better. And one of my examples here is like on rules of origin, maybe if the UK government goes away and agrees a really ambitious deal with the CPTPP on rules of origin, and it's got great flexibility in there, well, maybe we should be looking to come back to the European partners and say, can we have some accumulation? Can we have even more zero tariffs and zero quotas? Because I'm sure in the long run that will be best for everybody. And then my final point really is about leadership. So the UK and Europe, we have a lot of common views on things like social value, on things like zero carbon. And we should celebrate that shared sort of vision. And this being the year of COP26, I'm sure Simon's covered this already. With the conference at the end of the year, I think the UK can and should share its leadership on things like committing to zero carbon. As RIA, we would really like to see the publication of the Transport Decarbonisation Plan. And when we've got that, we should be sharing that best practice and working with our European colleagues to get the best deal we can out of COP26 in the autumn, because that's important globally. And I think that, a lot of the success of UK and European companies is because we develop that leadership and then we share it, and then we make a difference in the world. And I'm very much an optimist, as you will see there. But those were my sort of ideas that I wanted to share with people, and very happy to join the discussion now and take questions.
Well, thank you so much, Kate, for that view from the railway industry in the UK, but actually many of your members are SMEs, but also a lot of them are multinational and indeed European. I think it's a very good demonstration that although we're out of the European Union, we're still part of the European and indeed global family. And those supply chains, those business relationships, those success stories that your members represent will continue. And I think we all have a strong desire to make sure that they indeed continue to prosper in the future. And thanks for outlining your asks and your priorities for the year and indeed years ahead. I know Simon probably wants to come in on some of those points, but perhaps I'll just highlight, because we're getting a lot of questions in from our audience. So obviously very interested to hear what we're saying today. There's three so far. One is Tony Cox, trustee at ICA, who's asking, could we provide examples of the advantages to both the UK and EU arising from our departure? That's a question for Tony. Secondly is from Mikkel Sommet, who basically a question to us all, I think. Can we detect any changes in the attitude of our European partners? Cautiousness, or is it hostility, or is it business as usual? So what sort of reaction are we getting from our European partners? I might chip into that myself if I may. And the third one is on rail, actually. Question on whether or not, given that there will be a committee set up under the new partnership structure for road and aviation, is there going to be one on rail? Because rail supply chain issues, rail technical standards are obviously a key component of the transport success story. So I don't know who wants to go first on any of those questions. Maybe return to Simon first.
Yeah, thanks, Mark, and thanks for the questions. I think just on the first two, advantages of the TCA. Clearly, there's a long history to this, going back to the 2016 referendum that and the British people decided that they wanted to chart a different course. You know, two of the things. One is the question of sovereignty, which we all know is a well-trodden path. But the other is the ability to strike trade deals around the world without being kind of linked to the EU with all of this. So I think you know, some of the discussions that are going on now in terms of the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the opportunities that arise there, whatever your views are, the discussions with the US on a potential trade deal. And the government would say that obviously the gravity seems to be moving, you know, as we move forward to, you know, towards the Indo-Pacific region. So I think, you know, from a government perspective, and I'm a civil servant, so I think, you know, they want to look at other opportunities as we head into the kind of the next few years that being not tied to the EU would present, and that's a course that's been chosen by the British people. So that's probably, you know, kind of just some reflections, I think, on the first question. In terms of European partners, and I'd be interested, Mark, in your comments as well on this, I think it was fraught, particularly our engagement with interlocutors, particularly institutions, last year for very obvious reasons. I think, you know, my experience as well is that COVID hasn't helped, because Brussels is a town that relies on person-to-person contact, coffees, lunches, the chat in the EP, and jaunts down to Strasbourg. Really rich discussions that I've had before COVID came along, which has fundamentally changed the way we work. But what I sense just from dealing with interlocutors, particularly in the institutions now, is there is a debate to be had there. There's a discussion to be had, and certainly I've had really good discussions with the Commission on a number of issues, particularly around borders. That's very topical, and you know that we can use those good relationships to try and make sure that goods, you know, the flow of goods is maintained, and that's important at a European level, not just an EU level. But elsewhere, and when we're talking to industry, both UK and EU, European associations, that's something we never really did before, because we're spending our life in working groups. So actually, you know, from my perspective, we're looking at this a bit of a different way now. And you know, yes, there's a bit of a reputation that we need to rebuild, but we need to approach it from a different angle. And I think there's a lot of opportunities there, particularly in the way that we network and engage with people that I'm really keen. And hopefully, as we get the vaccination programs underway, people vaccinated, we can start unlocking across the continent, then we can actually get back to those discussions in person, which are kind of key in making the local world go round, as it were.
And over, I don't know whether you want to touch on the RAL committee, Simon. Is there a case for under the new TCA governance structure for a committee to deal with rail in parallel with the one for roads and aviation?
It's a good question. That's not my understanding at the moment. I think we need to get the agreement ratified, and then obviously there will be a view of looking at the structures and the governance arrangements that come within those. So I think at this stage it's probably too early to tell. We need to let this bed in and let the governance processes that have been designed in London at the moment, move forward and conclude. And of course, with everything there will be certain opportunities that will need to, or things that are missed that will need to be covered. And I think they will look at those at the point in time. So a bit too early at this point.
Thanks, Ron. Over to you, Kate, if you want to have a go at responding to any of those questions that I mentioned earlier.
Questions. Yeah, so that first one of what's better. So maybe I'll start just by being honest. So far so good, I would say. I think before Christmas there was a lot of concern that would suppliers be ready? Would Kent be gridlocked? Would it be just absolutely awful? And all credit to government and to maybe DfT in particular in all of the planning that went into that. And maybe it's one of the if there is anything good that's come out of COVID, just the fact that people weren't traveling and there wasn't so much business going on, but it's it feels like it's sort of okay. We're not hearing lots of horror stories or anything, and but I think that's partly because there's less traffic. There are less people traveling. There's lower freight. People had stockpiled and things. So we're not complacent about that. But so far so good. I think we should be honest. There is quite a lot of new bureaucracy. There are no tariffs and no quotas, but there's a lot of customs paperwork. We've got lots of people asking questions about what the VAT rules are, or what we do. And again, credit to my contacts in DfT. They've helped us organise a lot of briefing sessions for members just about how things work. What the rules actually are now. But I'm an optimist. I don't think any of us necessarily anticipated being here. I do think there is something about change that can be good. That it's made us, it's shaken us up a bit to sort of think, well, how do we behave? I think we still, there's a bit of the what and the how, isn't there? But I think what we want hasn't changed that much. Like those trade-offs that I just shared with you, they've probably been around for a while. When we were in Europe, if you'd asked me what we wanted, it was probably similar to what we now want when we're outside Europe. But how we achieve those things that we want, whether it's zero carbon or whether it's lower bureaucracy at borders, how we do it is slightly different. And maybe that's a bit of a wake-up call for us all to sort of think about how we achieve things and how we get what we want. You asked about relationships with Europe, and if I'm honest, I think I don't know how those relationships are going, and that's why one of my priorities is to get out there and talk to people and ask for Simon's help and DfT's help in re-establishing relationships with DG Move, with member states in Europe, so that we can agree what our shared priorities are and collaborate to sort of make things happen and make things better. And then on rail, and do you need a rail committee? Similarly, when I saw the deal, I was like, well, we haven't got an annex, why is there no annex for rail? And I think rail is different, so there was never a single market for rail in quite the same way there was, say for aviation. But I think it's a legitimate question, and I think what we're trying to think at the moment in the UK, working with other partners in the rail area, working with the Department for Transport, we're just trying to think about what we do where, what are the most important relationships and who should lead on them. And I think maybe it's right that we haven't got a specific committee in rail, but we do need to think how we're going to do rail business. Is it in our relationship with the European Rail Agency? Is it now with COTIF and OTIF? And I still don't know quite what they do, but clearly they're important. When are we doing things at the international level? When are we doing them at the European level? So let's keep thinking about that, because we need to fix things and make them better. Let's work out what the priorities are and where the best place is to make progress.
Thanks very much indeed, Kate. And before I turn to the next question that's coming, probably just worth saying from a UK transport in Europe point of view, particularly on I think Tony's point, that we spent the last 4 years debating the result of the referendum. We could spend the next 4 years debating the result of the referendum. But I think we had actually taken a conscious decision that whatever one may personally think about that decision, that was a decision made by the British people, ratified by the British Parliament. Our job now, our mission, our task is to make that a success. And the choice really we faced was between no deal and a deal. And for transport, we believe that made a huge difference having a good deal. And this is what we've got. And we've got to make this work. We want to make it better. We've got to make sure there's, as Kate said, positive interpretation now. There's a lot of gaps that, of course, need to be plugged. But it's much closer to where we want to be in terms of the strong relationship we want if we're outside of the EU. And Horizon Europe membership continuation is important. The TCA structure is very, very important. And a lot of it now will be down to the tone of conversations we have, which have to be pitched from a business point of view about making a success of this agreement. And on the point about tone of contacts and relationships here in Brussels, as Simon said, it's very difficult to properly analyze because a lot of it is now online, not offline. But I think what we're hearing from UKTI is that the mood has changed. There is a desire for a dialogue, but the key date will be the ratification of the TCA on the 30th of April. And I think from May onwards, we will see a huge difference in the type of relationship we have. It will become much more positive, constructive. And we as organizations, as businesses, have got to hit the ground running to make sure we follow up the opportunities that flow from ratification on the 1st of May. It's not like membership, but that wasn't the choice we were facing towards the end of last year. It was between no deal and a deal. So our view at UKTI is let's make this deal as successful as we possibly can. The next question that we've got is on bilateral relationships. We've already had some discussion in the context of COP26. And Simon mentioned visas and work permits, and there's also other rail-related issues as well. Putting a question to both of you, maybe starting off with Kate, how important do you think bilateral relationships will be in the future? You know, be it our Italian colleagues on COP26, Berlin or Paris, or indeed the other member states, and indeed third countries now, who I think we're much more focused on, Norway, Switzerland, Iceland, and of course our partners across the Atlantic and beyond.
So bilateral relationships are always important, and you need to invest in them. And that's why, like as RIA, you know, there are already practical things that we're doing, you know, so 24th, 25th of March, we're organising a conference, you know, where we will be showcasing UK best practice and opportunities. And we've asked our French and Italian counterparts to do the same. You know, because we want to carry on doing business together, and we know that we can do business well together, and we should be doing that. And you talked about the US. You know, we work very closely with the Department for International Trade, and they are, you know, asking for the supply chain for sort of examples and evidence to feed into the trade negotiations. So we're trying to support that. And one of the practical outcomes from that has been, you know, that we're now talking to the Department for Transport about a possible US trade mission where we can take some of our members who are interested in, you know, either already doing business in the States or wanting to do more business in the States. And you know, it's great that we're doing that. And I think it's part of that. You know, to me, one of the positives actually is that I think UK ministers seem to be more interested in doing that sort of trade activity and doing those sort of missions. And it's, you know, it's one of the positives out of COVID actually, that we're all doing a lot more of this, aren't we? We're all doing a lot more online events. And we've had two, you know, the first ever virtual trade missions. So, you know, already this year, my exports counterpart, he's had a virtual trade mission with DIT to Canada. And we've got a virtual trade mission, you know, with Australia coming up. And you know, that all reflects the fact that we think bilateral relationships are really important. And, you know, I hope over the year, you know, we'll be building on and deepening those bilateral relationships in Europe.
Thank you, Kate. Simon, do you want to address the question about bilateral relationships?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. It's the same as Kate said, really. You know, bilateral relationships are important. They've always been important, particularly for the UK. You know, we're looking at what we can do. We've always done things bilaterally when we're a member state. That's not going to change now. Obviously, our ministers are looking at you know, kind of bilateral engagement with a bit more vigour, particularly given we're currently in a COVID situation, and they are looking at what they can do and in different ways as part of their programmes. One thing that we've been doing, and again, I think there's a bit of a differentiation between what we do in UCMIS and what the network around European capitals does, is our primary focus must be the institutions. That's where the bilateral relationship with the EU kind of rests, is through us. But look, there's a lot of other bilateral relationships that we want to support within the EU entities. You know, look at other third country missions, the Swiss, you know, the US, the Canadians. These are kind of missions, you know, in the past, again, because we were so focused on working groups, that we necessarily didn't leverage as much as we can do. We've got the opportunity to do that now, and in some ways, you know, adds to that kind of broader voice within the Brussels environment. So I think, you know, we are going through a bit of a process of looking at the broader landscape, particularly in Brussels, how we can link in with the broader FCO network in a different way now than what we had before, and departments as well, because departments have got bilateral relationships of their own, and you know, in the old days of kind of being a member state, there would be things that we kind of serviced as part of the representation. There'd be a whole plethora of other things going on at EU level, comitology committees or various informal meetings that departments would service directly. So you know, they are still there in a lot of ways. You know, the way we do it has got to change. It's got to be a bit different, but we're kind of working through that. We're excited about doing it.
Thank you very much, Simon. Well, we're now in the final 4 minutes of this event. So perhaps in those final 4 minutes, we could just hear from both of you, just to wrap up really with your thoughts about 2021. You know, maybe your one or two key priorities in terms of seizing the opportunities we now have in terms of the EU-UK relationship on transport. Perhaps if we start with Kate and then end with Simon, if that's okay. So over to you, Kate, for your top 1, 2, or 3 targets for the year.
Okay, and I suppose I started with this, and it hasn't sort of changed. So, you know, my priorities for the year are, you know, developing, you know, re-establishing the right relationships with the European institutions, and I'm really pleased to be working with Mark and Simon on that. Establishing effective bilateral relationships, you know, with key partners. And then fixing things, you know, working out if there are things we can do to make life better, then we should do them. And I'm really looking forward to Glasgow, and to, you know, making a difference on zero carbon. You know, trying to sort of aggregate really our shared leadership and best practice, and showcase my members' capability there. So those are my priorities.
Thanks, Kate. That's great. And over to you, Simon. Your key priorities for 2021 for transport.
Yeah, so look, I think actually there was a lot in what Kate said, which I could identify with as well. But I think for me in UCMIS, I was just reflecting on the question earlier, so with the benefits. And I think, you know, in some ways, government can agree the framework. It's really got to be for industry, businesses, all those entities to leverage those benefits and maximise the TCA. So I think, you know, what we want to try and do is help do that. And I think that's one of the, for me, is kind of one of the near term and enduring benefit, you know, kind of priority that I think, you know, we need to kind of set ourselves collectively. Second one, I think obvious near term is COP. You know, can we actually get real commitments and action from this, and you know, again, working collectively, you know, between government, industry associations, think tanks, to really, you know, make an impact now. We all know the green agenda is very, very important, you know, issue that's critical to the planet. So let's really try and now get behind that and show leadership and doing something about it proactively. And then I think the final one is, as I kind of started, is innovation research, and that kind of links to the second, because a lot of the solutions are going to come through there. But again, for transport, I think this is, for me, has been the thing that's come out of this is let's try and leverage that a little bit more, understand what we can do, particularly with Horizon, but a bit more broadly at the global level. And I think that's one of the things that we might potentially move forward with this fora, and yourself, Mark, and other players to really try and see what the opportunities are within that and start to leverage those.
Well, thanks, Simon. Thanks, Kate. That's very, very clear what our ambition is for the year ahead. And I think, as Kate said earlier, this is all about collaboration, which is more important now than ever before. And I think this event today has been a good example of that. Government, business, of a trade association working together to promote our common agenda with a real desire to strengthen our relationships with our European partners, but also our global partners to promote a joint agenda. And I'd just like to conclude really by thanking EU-UK Forum for facilitating this dialogue, this conversation this afternoon. Everyone at EU-UK Forum are doing a great job to try and promote this new spirit of cooperation, a dialogue involving people, as we have done this afternoon, with questions, challenging questions that we want to respond to. So I wish them well in their ongoing task of promoting a much more constructive 2021 and indeed beyond this year in terms of UK-EU relations. I mean, our mantra at UCTI is that we can only move forward if we move forward together. So with that, on that note, I'd like to end today's session, thanking in particular EU-UK Forum, but of course our two guests, Simon and Kate. Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you.